Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, but more specifically, we're going to discuss the Bitcoin dominance, which, as always, of course, is everyone's favorite topic. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Do remember that there is a free tier available at intothecryptoverse.com, which will of course get you access to things like DCA tool, like a DCA tool, as well as a few logarithmic regression models. Let's go ahead and jump in. Now, the Bitcoin dominance is something that we have actually been talking about, it feels like, forever. And our general expectation has been that the dominance will ultimately go from 40% to approximately 60%. Right? That has been the view. We have talked about that view for a long time, and I still stand by that view. Now, what is interesting is that we know that the path from 40 to 60 is not a linear one. It is very much a stochastic process. But without fail, every time the dominance has any type of a pullback, a lot of people come out and they say why the dominance, is no longer going to rally, right? They sort of poke fun at the idea of the dominance rallying on each higher low. Okay, so the same arguments that are being made here to sort of FUD the idea behind the dominance rally were also made here, and they were made here as well, and they were made here, and the list goes on and on, right? So eventually, dominance will likely top out eventually, but the arguments that are being made, such as the relative strength index and all that sort of stuff, all those arguments were made at every prior level as well, and then eventually the dominance broke back out to the upside. So in this video, what I want to do is I want to show you at least some compelling evidence, in my view, as to why the dominance will move higher. We'll talk about a couple of nuances to this theory as well, and show you a couple things to take into consideration, even though I do remain very bullish on the Bitcoin dominance. And hopefully by the end of the video, we can be at a better understanding of just the extent of how far the altcoin reckoning can in fact go. So the first thing I would say is that retesting the breakout point was always a likely outcome. It is an outcome that we discussed many times. And in fact, it is the same thing that occurred last cycle as well. After we broke out, it occurred a lot quicker. I think it occurred a lot quicker last cycle because there was not nearly as much excess liquidity as there is this cycle. But we broke out and then we came back down to the breakout point only to then continue the rally. So yes, retesting the breakout point is a legitimate thing, right? And this was always a likely outcome. Oftentimes, when you spend a long period of time in a range and you break out of that range, you can often come back to retest the range that you broke out of. I do not believe, this is my view, and again, I could be wrong, right? I've been wrong about things before. I do not think that Bitcoin dominance spent 2 years consolidating in this range only to get a false breakout. That is my view, okay? I think it is important to have some views that I stand by. That is my view. I do not think that dominance spent 2 years in that range only to get a false breakout and then break back to the downside. I think what's more likely is that this is just simply back testing the breakout point. Now, I want to talk about something that, I've received a lot of feedback on this year. And a lot of people say, well, you've been focusing on the Bitcoin dominance rally a lot, but how come you never focus on the Bitcoin USD rally, right? Well, if you follow this channel, you should know the answer to that. If you follow it closely, and the answer, of course, is, well, my expectations for the pre-halving year is that Bitcoin spends about half the year going up and half the year going down. So I'm not going to, get super bullish on something that I ultimately expect to spend most of the year going sideways, right? One of the things that we actually talked about before is that when Bitcoin USD was sort of testing the 20-week back over here in June, we noted then that the dominance was more bullish than Bitcoin USD itself. And why did we note that? Because dominance back then was not even at the point where it was testing the bull market support band, right? Back over here in June, the dominance was so bullish that it did not even get a retest of the 20-week SMA and the 21-week EMA. So what we said back then was that whenever Bitcoin USD does fall below the 20-week SMA, and we suggested that it could very likely occur in August or September of the pre-halving year due to a seasonal correction in the S&P 500 in August or September of the pre-election year, that the dominance should still continue to go higher even if Bitcoin does not. So we could have a pre-halving year where Bitcoin ends the year at the same price that it started the year, but the dominance could have gone from 40% to 60% during that time frame. So you would have effectively seen a rotation of capital from from higher risk assets to lower risk assets, from lower liquid assets to higher liquidity assets. And so you can see that Bitcoin has broken below its bull market support band, but Bitcoin dominance has not. Going into that same idea that the dominance of Bitcoin is fundamentally more bullish than Bitcoin USD is. And the reason for that, of course, is because we are in a phase of the cycle where liquidity is being pulled out and the higher liquid assets get hit quicker. The higher risk assets get hit quicker. And there's not nearly as much liquidity in the altcoin market. So yes, the altcoin market on these bear market rallies by these altcoins, they can bounce a lot, but there's still not a whole lot of liquidity there. And so when the risk off environment sets in, those altcoins get absolutely wrecked, right? And that's where the altcoin reckoning comes from. You don't have to have known. You did not need to wait for Bitcoin to close the 20-week, to close below the 20-week to realize that altcoins were getting wrecked. Just look at what they were doing on their Bitcoin pairs for the last 20 months. Because Bitcoin was in a risk-on environment since January, it has lulled a lot of people into a false sense of security with the altcoin market. But I would say yet again that the altcoin market, right, we'll talk about Ether, Bitcoin later, but the altcoin market has been unable to put in a single higher high. All of these are lower highs. It has not been able to put in a single higher high since this whole thing kicked off. And this price action you see over here that is relatively humdrum and no one really cares about, this occurred when Bitcoin was going up. Okay, so think about that. Bitcoin went up, and this is what Total 3 accomplished. Nothing. It's at the same level that it was at back in November of 2022. So what happens to the altcoin market if we go into a risk-off environment where Bitcoin goes down? And if you are bullish on the S&P 500, and therefore you think that because the S&P is bullish, which again, we're in a seasonal phase where the S&P corrects, there's no guarantee that this is quote-unquote the big one. If it is the big one, then yes, the crypto gets crushed. Even if it's not, even if the S&P trends higher later on, I will remind you that in 2019, the S&P had a pretty deep correction here in August, September, and then it rallied to new highs. But during that rally, Bitcoin kept going lower. Okay, so when we look at the dominance, when we look at things like, you know, Bitcoin and how is it going to perform if the S&P goes higher? Well, I'm putting forth the argument that I have for a long time that in the second half of the pre-halving year, it doesn't really matter what the S&P 500 does. Crypto likely gets wrecked either way because it's further up on the risk curve. We're getting later on into the business cycle. The closer we get to the uninversion of the yield curve, the closer we get to the recession risk actually materializing. And that's where typically altcoins going into that might actually find a bottom in say, the early part of a recession. But I just don't I think we're not at that point just yet, okay? So, yes, we have basically all these influencers coming out and they're fudding the Bitcoin dominance. But why should this time be any different? They did the same thing here at 47%. They said they did the same thing at 43%, the same thing at 41%, and 39% and 38%. You know, so if you go look, they're going to use the same argument no matter what, and they've been fading the dominance every step of the way, and I think they will continue to fade it every step of the way. So look to see if this holds. even if it goes below like it did last cycle, you can see here if this were the breakout point right here, we came slightly below it, but then we got back right above it the following week. So even in that environment, you would have to see multiple weekly closes below 49%, right? Really below the breakout zone of around 48.9% or so. So if you get multiple weekly closes below there, then it might start to pay attention in terms of perhaps it goes back down. But I don't think that will be the case. I think it's more likely that the dominance holds. The dominance moves higher, it consolidates. It moves higher and consolidates. And it moves higher, consolidates, and it moves higher and consolidates again. One thing that we've talked about a lot too is that whatever direction the dominance is going into September, it typically reverses course. And, we said a few months ago that if the dominance gets to rally over here going into September, then it might actually get a temporary pullback before continuing its run in, sometime after the halving. But it's actually gone down into September, right? I mean, you can see that it hit a local high in June. It's gone down, and we're only about a one week away from September. So I would argue that there's a good chance that September could lead the dominance higher once again. There's a couple of interesting charts that we could really take a look at here that I think are somewhat compelling. And one of those, of course, is total 3 minus USDT divided by the Bitcoin market cap. And when you look at that, this is the chart that you get. And you will notice, again, that the altcoin market tends to top when it reaches a parity with Bitcoin. So when the altcoin market cap is approximately equivalent to the Bitcoin market cap, you can see that's equivalent at about 1. That's where the altcoin market tops out on their Bitcoin pairs. But they also bottom out at around 25%, with the exception of the post-halving rally by Bitcoin that took it all the way down to about 18%. Okay? Now, where we are right now with the bull market support band or bear market resistance band of this metric, it is now at 0.48 to 0.5. And we just hit 0.48 or 48%. So the altcoin market right now, using this metric, is about 47% of Bitcoin's market cap. What I find interesting is that this is the same level that it got rejected at, more or less, in the last cycle. And after getting rejected around this level, total 3 minus USDT divided by Bitcoin dropped another 40 to 50% from these levels. Right? So from here, from where we currently are to get back down to this low, it would be another 47% drop, which I contend is still a highly likely outcome. Now, if you want to include Ethereum, then you just simply need to go look at total 2 minus USDT divided by Bitcoin. And when you look at that chart, what does it show you? It shows you that this current level here at 0.86 or 86% of Bitcoin's market cap, so everything in crypto, except for Bitcoin, and we've subtracted out USDT, you can see that it has peaked out or it's potentially peaking out here just below 90%. But again, where did it peak out last cycle? At around in the pre-halving year, right? In the pre-halving year, where did it ultimately peak out? And you can see that it came to about this level once again before it ended up dropping very quickly down to about 0.57. So a drop to 0.57 from here would mean another 33 to 34% drop. And if it comes all the way back down to this level, then it means another 60% drop, or about a 59% drop relative to Bitcoin. So a lot of people are coming out and they're very bearish on the Bitcoin dominance because of the most recent pullback, even though I would argue it's nothing more than a retest of the prior breakout point. They are getting bullish right as it's probably getting rejected by the bull market support band. And there's a good chance here that we see the altcoin market sell off with respect to Bitcoin once again. Okay, so please be careful that the sentiment that you'll find on Twitter anytime we get a day where the altcoins are up against Bitcoin, everyone is sort of dunking on the Bitcoin dominance. But then when it goes up and puts in a new high, they're typically nowhere to be found, only that they're searching for another reason why they want to fade the Bitcoin dominance. But they've been fading it every step of the way from 38 to 52%. And now that the dominance has gotten a simple pullback to the breakout point, they're dunking on it once again. A level which a few weeks ago they would have told you was the reason alt season was about to start, right? Just be careful with these narratives, okay? And I say this very seriously, because the altcoin market can wreck you, right, very easily if you do not understand how much risk is involved in the altcoin market. That's not to say that there are no bear market rallies in it. That's not to say that there are not a few altcoins that have outperformed Bitcoin and have likely already bottomed against Bitcoin. But it is to say that collectively, most of these altcoins are still likely in macro downtrends against Bitcoin. And the last couple of weeks, yes, we got a bounce on all Bitcoin pairs, but it doesn't necessarily change the larger trend. One thing that some people have looked at is to say, well, the trend is broken. Do remember, and this is a petty argument on my part, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but TradingView did add a lot of new altcoins to the definition of Total 3, or at least of Total. And so because they've added a lot of new altcoins, that was one of the reasons why dominance is actually lower. If we were using the same definition on TradingView that they were using maybe a few weeks ago, I believe the dominance, it would still be below 50%, but maybe it'd be about 49.7 or 49.8%. So one of the reasons it's taken as big of a hit as it has is they actually changed the definition. But even in this case, at 49.32%, it is still not a perfect reflection of the dominance, because if you go look at it on my website, where we're accounting for a lot of, a ton of different cryptocurrencies, we have it 48.47%. So on my website, I actually have the dominance as lower than where TradingView has it. But what's more important is the trend, right? The trend is higher lows and higher highs. Look at this trend here, right? It's just been one higher low after another, and I would still say that this is just likely another higher low. If you exclude stablecoins, this is the chart that you get. Excluding stablecoins, higher lows since May of 2021. Okay? Higher lows. Even the rally that ETH got last year, going into the merge, did not reflect anything other than a higher low on the Bitcoin dominance. And that should not come as a surprise. I mean, if you go look at the Ether Bitcoin valuation, it still was a lower high, was it not? This was a lower high compared to what Ether Bitcoin accomplished in December of 2021. So one of the ways that the dominance goes up a lot is Ether Bitcoin gets rejected here at its own bull market support band. And if it does, and if it continues to come back down, then the dominance of Bitcoin can go up quicker than a lot of people think it can. It can move several percent in just a few weeks at times. So do not forget that it can do that. It's done it many times before, and it can do it again. And I still look at this chart, the Ether Bitcoin chart, and say, has anything changed? Does it not just look like a massive distribution phase? People keep saying that Ether Bitcoin is holding up well this year. The monthly Fibonacci candles for Ether Bitcoin have been red since the year started, since January. They say that it's held up all year and all last year too. But again, the yearly candles on Ether Bitcoin are both red for 2023 and 2022. And note that in 2019, the close was below the wick of 2018. So if in 2023, the close for Ether Bitcoin is below the wick in 2022, then it means that Ether Bitcoin could close the year below 0.049. Last cycle, we closed the year about 28%, 27% below this wick. 27% below that wick today would put Ether Bitcoin, coincidentally, at 0.036. And I've said many times, I think the Ether Bitcoin valuation is going to that 0.03 to 0.04 range. And I still stand by that statement. And so, yes, it's easy for people to come out swinging on the Bitcoin dominance anytime there is a pullback. But I have to ask you, who's on the right side of the trend here? Who's been on the right side of this? Is it the people that keep fading it? Or is it the people that just keep saying, hey, this is just a higher low, and it's just one higher low after another? So please be aware that if you constantly fade the dominance in favor of altcoin accumulation, normally what happens is Bitcoin will chew you up and spit you out if we are in the pre-halving year, and that's where we currently are. So do be aware of that likely outcome. The other thing I've mentioned many times as to why the dominance should head higher is because if you go take a look at the social risk, which we've talked about a lot, right? If you go take a look at the social risk, you will remember, and I've said this many, many times, who's the marginal buyer of your altcoin when people are net leaving the space? Lower highs and lower lows on the social risk. And when you go plot out, if you were to plot out the social risk, so let's plot this out really quick. So social risk, and then I don't really care about the price. I just want to look at the social risk. And I also want to look at the dominance without stablecoins. And look at this compelling chart. As the social risk goes down, the dominance goes up. As the social risk goes down, the dominance goes up. The social risk is still in the process of going down. Therefore, the dominance, in my opinion, should still head much higher. Okay? So if Bitcoin were to sell off quickly, yes, you can sometimes see the dominance go down, but I think after the market really starts to digest the move, you should see the dominance continue its breakout once again. And just the other day, we saw Ether really start to sell off somewhat quickly, and then it sort of popped back up. But if the risk-off environment remains for at least a few months, which I think it likely will, I think there's a lot more downside on Ether than there is Bitcoin. And do note that throughout history, and I believe this is true, I have a table, I don't have it up right now, but every time Bitcoin has closed a weekly close below the 20-week SMA, Ether Bitcoin has always underperformed until Bitcoin closed back above the 20-week SMA. So my expectation again is that the Ether Bitcoin pair will underperform until Bitcoin gets back above its 20-week moving average. It doesn't mean that once they all capitulate, it doesn't mean that Ether Bitcoin can't go higher first, but just from where Ether Bitcoin was when Bitcoin broke below the 20-week to where it'll be when Bitcoin breaks back above it, I would expect Ether Bitcoin to be at a lower valuation, and that might not occur. It could still be a while before we see it, before we can actually test to see if that theory plays out once again or not. Going back to total 3, I would say that this is somewhat of a dangerous pattern. You're looking at a high, a lower high, a lower high. And I mean, if we keep coming back down to this level and keep testing it, it seems like it's only a matter of time before we could break below it. Do note that I think a drop below this level in the altcoin market, that would likely mark the depression phase of the cycle. And that is probably, somewhere over here. It could easily be where altcoins find their lows on their USD pairs. The ones that are at least going to survive for the next cycle, somewhere in this depression phase over here, and it could occur as late as early 2024. If you think that means that, if you think that's too long, just remember last cycle alts did not bottom out until 2 months before the halving in a very brief recession. And again, we have an inverted yield curve. Good chance the altcoin market does not bottom out until around yield curve uninversion or maybe slightly after. And so, yes, I think ultimately that is the direction that we're likely heading. Getting into a depression phase in the altcoin market where the Ether Bitcoin valuation leads the altcoin market down. Remember, as I've said, in the end, even the giants will fall, and that very much includes the Ether Bitcoin pair. And if the Ether dominance goes down, right? If the Ether dominance goes down, then you're likely going to see the Bitcoin dominance going up. And I'm not calling for Ether dominance to come back down here. I'm not saying that it's going to go back to 7%, but maybe it comes all the way down to like 10% or something. Again, these are lower highs. These are all lower highs. We also have some higher lows to take a look at right here, and we'll see what happens. But I'm telling you, if the Ether dominance drops, look at it right here, last cycle. I mean, this is where it was when it really started to drop, and once it dropped quickly. I'm not saying it has to go back down here. I don't think it will, to be completely honest. But it could come back into this like 9 to 10% range, which is a pretty big drop by Ether. And I think a lot of that dominance would just go into Bitcoin. Like I think the dominance of Bitcoin would go up at the detriment of the Ether dominance. And if you look at it overlaid with Bitcoin dominance, if I can pull that up. There it is, right? So if if Ether dominance does drop, then that would likely cause the Bitcoin dominance to go up, just like it historically has, right? So, there's certainly reasons that you could look at why the dominance can't go higher, right? There's a lot of people that are talking about that stuff, but I just wanted to spend this video telling you why there is a good chance that the dominance does go a lot higher, and hopefully I've made a compelling case. There are counterpoints to some of this stuff. For instance, in 2019, once Bitcoin got this weekly close below the 20-week SMA in September, so this occurred late September, that did mark the low for some altcoins on their Bitcoin pairs. Not all of them, but it did mark the low for some of them. And so that is something that we would have to contend with as well. And I will say that if the dominance does not continue the rally, as we see Bitcoin USD theoretically go down, then perhaps we would need to take more note of that, right? This is a counterpoint, and it's a valid counterpoint to consider. Like if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, like if you were to look at ADA Bitcoin, remember it really bottomed out here in Q3 of the pre-halving year. Q3 of the pre-halving year, but it held these lows. The great thing about this theory with altcoins and the altcoin reckoning is that you wait to see if it holds the lows, right? And if ADA Bitcoin holds the lows, then that might mean that some of these altcoins have actually bottomed out against Bitcoin. But if it doesn't, and it just keeps on capitulating, then it's just doing the same thing that it did last cycle. The other thing too is that during this area down here, you might say, well, gosh, maybe I should have just bought ADA right over here, right, in August 2019. But remember, it held the lows in a Bitcoin USD downtrend, right, in a downtrend. So now that we're potentially in a Bitcoin USD downtrend, you wait to see which altcoins can actually hold their lows on their Bitcoin pairs. And if ADA Bitcoin cannot hold this low and it starts moving down in this area, then you're likely looking at, again, the depression phase of the altcoin market, where going back to this chart we looked at earlier, total 3 minus USDT divided by Bitcoin, this is where that depression phase sets in for the altcoin market, where they actually do get that final flush to the downside, where they go lower than most people think they possibly could have. Okay? So that is just at least one way to look at this market. I know it's not going to necessarily make everyone happy, and there's also a chance that it doesn't play out. But I will remind you that there are a lot of people that are fading the dominance now, and it's only natural, but they've also faded it for the last year, really, and for the last 2 years. And there's going to be a ton of people that are going to point out lower highs. If you're going to point out lower highs, be willing to point out the higher lows. Okay? If from one cycle to another, the altcoin market, all the new coins that come in, this is the common argument. People say, well, there's so many more coins that come in. Why would the dominance go as high? Well, you tell me, right? If all these coins mattered so much, if all the tens of thousands of coins mattered so much and made it so that the dominance of Bitcoin was just going to just continue to go down forever, why then was it unable to take out the prior low? Okay, you tell me. Hey, think about that. Even with the stablecoin market taking away, like 10% of Bitcoin's market cap? Or sorry, not 10% of Bitcoin's market cap, like 10% of the dominance? Right, if you were to look at USDT, let me pull it up on a different one. USDT dominance plus USDC dominance. Let me switch this over here. Look at this. 10%. USDT, USDC, 10% of the market cap. Over here it was about 3 to 4%, right? So even though the stablecoin market took up 3 to 4% of the overall market, and this is just 2 of the stablecoins, there's other stablecoins as well, but even though that happened, the dominance did not even put in a lower low. It didn't even get to where it was, right? Not even a double bottom. So again, for me, this argument does not hold under scrutiny to say that because there's more altcoins, the dominance has to go down forever. Because if that argument were true, why did we not take out the prior low? So that is why I will continue to think that the Bitcoin dominance is heading to 60%. 60% is this level that we broke down from, right? Look at this level right here, right? So 60% is right here. This is the level that we ultimately broke down from. We have gone half the move up in a Bitcoin USD uptrend, and therefore I put forth again the idea that the second half of the move could come during a Bitcoin USD downtrend. Remember, last cycle, if we overlay Bitcoin USD onto this chart, let me flip this over to a logarithmic scale, you will see here very clearly that the dominance went up in a Bitcoin USD uptrend, and then it from 39% to 52%. Sound familiar? So let's zoom out here so I can get all this on the screen. From 39% right here to about 51% or so, right? It really rallied a little bit more until so at about 52%, maybe about 52. Because you can see here, this peak on Bitcoin USD corresponded to like right around here. So Bitcoin dominance last cycle went up on a Bitcoin rally from 39 to 52%. It then had a pullback down to about 49, 50%. This low on that candle was about 50.01%. And then it went up as Bitcoin slowly faded back down. So what happens if Bitcoin slowly fades back down in a risk-off environment? What do you think gets hit worse? Is it Bitcoin or is it the lower liquid, higher risk altcoin market? So that again is why I think that the rally from here by the dominance to 60% could be due to Bitcoin USD going down / sideways, right? Like, so over here, it would go down, it would then bounce back up and then keep going down. So there's a chance here that the dominance goes up, not because Bitcoin's going higher, but because Bitcoin's going lower. And now that we finally get to go into a risk-off environment, we get to see true price discovery to the downside on some of these altcoins and figure out where is the actual bid. You know where the bid is in a risk-on environment. Where's the bid in a risk-off environment? And that is why the dominance can go to 60%, just like it did last cycle. So the dominance, in my opinion, is still likely heading higher. I see a lot of people coming out and dunking on it because it's pulled back to the level that they were previously calling for alt season at, back over here. And I would say there's a good chance it's just going to bounce here and go a lot higher. And I just want people to be aware of it. I say this not from, I'm not trying to act in any certain way. I just say it because I have been wrecked in the altcoin market more than once, okay? You don't think I was in for a surprise over here when I was buying some altcoins in Q3 of 2018 when the dominance was at 50%, and then those altcoins just kept getting hammered hard, and then they kept going down, even in late 2019 and early 2020. So even if you think it's unfair to compare it to here, well, so what? Compare it over here. Even if the dominance has topped out, there's still, the altcoins still likely go down on their USD pairs. So you still want to wait on Bitcoin pairs, theoretically, to convincingly bottom before we can fully understand if the altcoin market collectively has bottomed. But as long as total 3 minus USDT divided by Bitcoin is still in this trend, then why should we ignore the prior range of this? The prior range is from 25% to 1, with the exception of Bitcoin's post-halving rally. This seems like the likely outcome. Another 40 to 50% drop in altcoins on their Bitcoin pairs in a Bitcoin USD downtrend. That is the altcoin reckoning. This is what we've been talking about for 20 months now. And I hope that these views have helped some people not lose a lot of money in the highly risky altcoin market. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Again, we do have a free tier available, so I'd encourage you to check that out. Link is in the description below and the pinned comment. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.